Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to the next episode of Breaking into Breaking Bad with Clifford and Caleb Humphrey. Today we're discussing Season 2, Episode 11, Mandala. I don't know how this is pronounced, but that's the name of the episode. Cabes, you want to give us a brief synopsis of what happens in this episode?
Yeah. So this was, episode 11. A lot of different moving parts from a couple different characters. You see progression of Walt's and Skylar's soon-to-be baby at the very end of the episode. You actually see that the baby is coming. You also see the introduction of Walt to who we now know as Gus, or Gustavo Fring, who is portrayed as the person that's going to be a heavy hitter in the distribution of methamphetamine in New Mexico. Between Jesse and Jane, you see their relationship kind of take a big step. One might say backwards in their lives. And the big thing about it is the big part of this episode is you see one of Jesse's friends, employees named Combo, get shot by a 12-year-old kid at the beginning of the episode, and you kind of left to not know what's going on, and it was due because Walt and Jesse wanted to expand their territory, and so they're dealing with some unforeseen circumstances, and that's pretty much the gist of what had gone on.
Yeah, there's some pretty heavy stuff in this episode. I mean, really heavy stuff. Well, we'll get into it, but first let's discuss the title of this episode. So again, I mentioned I don't know how to pronounce it. At first, I thought it was like Mandela, like Nelson Mandela or something, but Mandala. I had to look it up, and it turns out it has a couple of different things. It has something to do with Hinduism and Buddhism, though. It's a shape or some sort of figure, a geometric figure in Hinduism and Buddhist thought. And the definition that I think probably relates to what's going on here is it means a symbol in a dream that represents the dreamer's search for completeness and self-unity. I don't know exactly what that refers to in the episode, but we do see Jesse take a pretty heavy drug and goes into a dreamlike state. And perhaps there are some mandalas in that experience, and he gets a glimpse of his search for completeness and self-unity. I'm not sure, but perhaps what the creators of the show are hinting at is that in this episode, Jesse and Jane, of course, are getting into some drugs and pursuing some kind of sense of an experience there that you might say is a completing kind of thing. And then with Walt, he gets really into trying to sell this last bundle of crystal meth, even though we know from last time it's not really imperative that he sell it, right? It's only because he decides to take this extra treatment that we know he's going to need some more funding. And he is bound and determined to sell his meth to Gus. And so in a way, he's sort of searching for some kind of completeness in his desperation to do that. I don't know. You got anything else?
Yeah. So to go off of the desperation part, I think it's really shown in the conversation that Walt, Jesse, and Saul Goodman have, where you see Walt very frustrated with how everything is kind of developed as they've gone along. And he makes the comment, for every one step forward, we take two steps back. And that's just the development of him being an amateur, not knowing anything about this business, and then kind of failing and then learning as he goes along, and kind of going from there. Yeah, I mean that was a big part of him. I mean, we're kind of jumping towards the end part of here.
Well, let's just stick with the title. But I mean, there's nothing else I've got from that. But
Yeah.
I think suffice it to say, if you're a casual watcher of this show, you probably saw the title of this episode and didn't think twice about it. And what we're adding is just to say, hey, look up the definition of this word. It's probably got a deeper significance than you think, and you might find it interesting to delve into it a little bit. So with that, we can get into the meat of the episode. So the intro, there was something ominous about the way it was all set up. Kind of thought something bad was going to happen. Although when it's the kid who pulls the trigger and not the guys in the car, that was really surprising. And it had this, I don't know, what was the effect on you when you see a little kid shoot Combo like that?
Yeah, it was obviously surprising, and obviously Combo had no idea. He wasn't expecting it at all. He didn't think that kid was capable of it. He wasn't even putting two and two together. And you see the car after they passed by circle back around, and then right when he honked, that's when he got shot. And you could just see in his eyes, he just didn't see it coming. But yeah, I definitely didn't.
Yeah, it was really sad.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was telling that the guys in the car, they didn't come up and, I don't know, take his drugs or anything like that. They weren't after his drugs. They weren't after it. They just wanted to send a message to signal something like, this is our territory.
Right.
And they did it in such a way that was, I mean, I don't know how they convinced that little kid to shoot him, whether they paid him or whether they threatened him or whether it was some kind of initiation into a gang kind of a thing. I don't know, he was pretty young, but even then. But the point is that it wasn't just, it was premeditated, organized crime. There was a larger network going on there than just two guys who show up and didn't like the way Combo was looking at him. We're reminded that these drug organizations are in fact that, organizations at a high level, and they operate, according to a hierarchy. And so we're getting just a little hint of that, but I think that we're going to see more in the future, given where things seem to be going.
Right.
So that's our intro. We just see Combo getting taken out there. And then the next scene is Walt getting some consultation with his doctor and the surgeon, talking about an invasive kind of surgery that they think is going to be necessary for his cancer treatment. And the most interesting thing there is that they say it's risky and that it's expensive. And Walt almost doesn't hesitate and just says, we'll do it. Let's do it. Sign me up. And Skylar's like, well, wait, maybe we should think about this. We should make a pros and cons list because it might not work and it's really expensive. And so they've kind of flipped roles, because it was Skylar before, right? Who didn't even think about it, right? Of course, we're going to do this treatment. Right. So in your mind, what makes Walt change? What's different now?
Well, from Skylar's point of view, I think she's still riding on the high of the good news. And they kind of shot that good news down. They're like, yeah, you bought some time, but not a lot, very little. And they kind of made that good news that he got not so good after all. So I think it almost came across as she was a little confused, but they also said it was $170,000 to $200,000. And she obviously knows that that's not something that they could afford. They don't have that. But Walt, it like focuses on his face, and you could just see that since he was given this chance of, hey, you're actually not going to die anytime soon. And now we can do this to prolong that even more. Like that in his mind, I think that he was saying, like, the show goes on. Like, let's keep going, and it was in my mind, and we always kind of go back to this Jekyll and Hyde scenario. Heisenberg was like, let's do it, like, let's go for it. Like, I just feel like it's the right thing to do, let's just go for it. And
so that's interesting. I don't know if this is what you meant, but it's a good point. I think it could be true that he's just thinking, you know what, I was kind of skeptical of these treatments in the past, but you know what, I saw that it works. Let's do it. Let's just see if we can beat this cancer. It could be that would be something, right? But maybe, and this is what I got from you, maybe he's also saying, here's an excuse to keep cooking, to stay in the game. Here's another reason why I'm going to have to now do something with that meth that we cooked, because he didn't need to sell it. He didn't need to do the really dangerous, risky thing, which was find a way to get the crystal meth on the market, because that's where all their problems come, right? So in a way, maybe he jumped at this because then he knew, oh, well, now I have to cook, right? Like I have to stay involved in the drug game. And that means there's some excitement still coming.
Yeah, because it feeds that reason that he got into it in the first place.
That's right.
So yeah, that is a good point. I mean, also with
you take credit for that one though. Pretend that you came up with that one.
Well, what was the main reason when he was coughing up blood? It was pneumonitis or something like that. That was a big scare for him because he was coughing up blood and he was like, it's any minute now. So when he found out, it's like, oh, it's common. You just need to take these, antibiotics and you're good. So I do think it's like, hey, here's an opportunity to kind of continue the show. But also, I think he's kind of coming to grips like, we just cooked 38 pounds of this stuff. Like, we could sell this for over $1 million. Like, I think he's also seen.
Yeah. He knows he can afford it. It's nothing. Let's do it. Yeah.
But he's starting to like this lifestyle. I mean, even if we go back to the very beginning, when Jesse calls Walt and says, hey, we have a problem. Combo got shot. And Walt's first response was, which one is that? Like, not of, oh my gosh, like, holy cow, what do we do? Like, his responses have gotten more and more like dull in the sense of caring.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but remember they made a big deal about, look, you're in charge of distribution. I'm in charge of the chemistry, right?
Yep.
So in a way, I don't really blame Walt for not knowing which one Skinny is and which one Combo.
Oh yeah.
In a way, it kind of protects them, right? Like, I don't know the distribution guys. If
it was a funny first response, like, oh no way.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Which one?
Yeah, if we can contrast that to Jesse's response when Walt tells him about his cancer being in remission. Hey, fantastic, right? I know he's got that very human. He's not thinking about how does this affect me. He's thinking, this is great for Walt, right? Mm-hmm. When Walt hears about Combo, he doesn't say it, but he's just thinking, wait a minute, how does this affect us? He's not thinking, oh man, poor Combo and his family and all of that.
That's a really good comparison.
In that same scene when Skinny Pete basically resigns, tells Jesse, he says a line that I thought was interesting. He says, this game we're playing, we ain't got the street cred to survive it.
Right.
It
was smart. It made total sense.
He's like, everybody knows that you didn't crush that guy's head with the ATM machine. We lost all of our credibility. We lost all of our prestige. And now that Combo's been taken out and we don't know who it was and we don't have the manpower to exact revenge.
Right. The last Badger's, in California or something.
Yeah. Badger's having to lay low because of his arrest. So, right. But I thought that was a pretty accurate estimation of where things stand. They don't have the street cred to survive it.
Well, that led them to the meeting with Saul. Right.
And I like Saul. I mean, I'm just getting to know the guy a little bit again, but I like him. He's like, let's just be honest. You guys suck at distribution. Like, you're really, really bad at it. You need to outsource that to someone else and focus on what you do well. I mean, when he said that, I was sort of thinking, okay, well, that makes Jesse kind of unnecessary because Jesse's not that vital for the production. His whole thing was distribution.
It's weird that it is still distribution, but also he is heavily involved in the cooking with Walt.
Well, he's
Really,
the one who
he's
the one
doing-
who brings the RV around. He's the one who's storing the meth. He's taking on some risks by
Right, but
having
he's
that
the
there.
lab assistant. He's literally right next to Walt, pouring the chemicals, doing all this stuff. Like Walt's
Right.
not there with him talking to
And we know he's
other,
gotten
you
he's
know.
gotten better, right? I mean, that time,
Yeah.
that one scene when Walt has to sit down in his chair in the desert and he's like, you finish it, you do the last batch.
Yeah. So yeah, he definitely knows his stuff more than he did before. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying though. Like Saul just put it there, plain and simple. Like this is a business. That's what he says. He goes, "Hey, act like professionals. You guys are bickering right now over something that's just not prudent. They can definitely, do
Yeah.
something better here."
Okay, what else do we need to discuss about the meeting with Saul? He's the one who puts them in touch with Gus somehow. I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy.
Correct.
So Saul's already proving to be extremely valuable.
Right, and he made the big comparison because Walt was done with dealing with another Tuco. And
Right.
like, no, this is somebody that's been doing this for 20 years, never got caught. And I don't even know his name. Like this guy is definitely good at what he does.
Yeah, and he mentions that he said he's a lot like you, Walt. He's somebody that no one would expect to do this.
Which is pretty key later in the episode.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the scene with Jane and Jesse. So Jesse gets kind of depressed, all right, with Combo and with the way everything's going. He wants to smoke some of the meth. Now, I will not pretend to know a whole lot about drugs, but it's clear there are different ways of doing crystal meth. So you can do what Tuco does when he's in his office and he crushes it with his knife and he snorts it, right?
Right.
I guess you can put it in a bowl and smoke it. And we learn later on, of course, that you can
mix it with heroin and
inject it. Yeah, right. So Jesse wants to get high, but he cares for Jane. He tells her he knows, that I want to do this and you need to go somewhere else because I know you're trying to get away from drugs.
Right.
And he says, I know you go to those meetings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she says to him, you should come to the meetings too. And she gives him that opportunity for a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And then she starts to leave. And then if you remember when she puts her hand on the doorknob and the camera focuses on her hand on the doorknob, I thought, what a cool image of a choice. Do you go through that door or do you stay and basically go through this other door?
It was tough to watch because you could tell she was trying so hard to make the right decision and just couldn't get through to him. But it was also her talking to herself at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a criticism of the show. I've never understood. They haven't really made it clear why she's attracted to Jesse. She seems like a girl who's got her stuff together when they first meet. She would seem to be a kind of person that would recognize that Jesse's not going anywhere in life. He's not the kind of guy that's going to take her on dates to the museum in El Paso or wherever, Santa Fe. And I never understood why she's necessarily attracted to him. But
well, I mean, you had mentioned it in a couple episodes before. Like she sees the popularity that he holds. Like, oh, you're the man, Pinkman. But also, he is like involved in something that she was addicted to for a long time. So it's that lifestyle that I'm sure was very exciting and fun and interesting, and she's probably been out of the game for a long time. I forget how many days that she was 18 months that she's been clean. She had an 18-month coin or whatever chip. So like just to be accidentally kind of thrusted back into that lifestyle and then also be attached, emotionally with this new guy who just happens to be a drug dealer, not, just a pothead, but he's a little bit of both.
Right.
I could see why she fell back into it.
Yeah. Well, this episode, I think, highlights just a couple key choices that characters make. And for Jane, this is the big one. I think for Jesse, wasn't it a rule, right, that Walt had? We don't smoke our own stuff.
Right. We don't smoke our own supply.
So I think does Jesse break a rule? Does he break one of the rules here and starts to smoke, or does he not touch their own stuff and has his own stash? I don't know, but it seemed pretty clear that though Jesse gets mildly high with marijuana every now and then, he seemed like he was really gonna kind of just disappear for a few days.
Oh yeah, he was kind of rough.
Yeah, so he kind of makes a choice there, and then Skylar's got a major choice too.
I just gotta say this, and I always cringe. Like when you watch shows, there's certain episodes or parts episodes where you think back and you're just like, oh, I don't want to ever see that again. The birthday song. That is the most cringe part of the entire show.
So bad.
I hate coming to it. It's the little wobble that she does to him before she starts singing that just sets the whole. Oh, it's rough.
I mean, it's supposed to be some sort of inside joke where they've done that before or something, and it's funny, but it just wasn't really.
No one was wanting to get in on it at all. Like, hey, the candles are burning.
Yeah,
and it even showed them all the way down to the bottom. It's just, whoa.
Yeah, that was right.
Hard to watch.
But the choice I'm referring to is she gets into the books of the finances and discovers there's discrepancies that have not been accounted for and that haven't been reported to the IRS as taxable income. And she knows that her boss is breaking the law. And the big choice she has is, do I turn him in? She's made that choice. I'm not going to do that. But she says, I'm not going to be a part of this. But then she comes back. And so we see that she's conflicted. On one hand, is she telling herself, I don't really have a choice. I have to have this income because Walt's going to do this new treatment and we have to have the money. Surely she knows that that's not going to cut it. It's not going to be enough money. Maybe they're on like some 30-year payment plan. I don't know. And she could do that. But that's one possible explanation. The other explanation is that she gets some kind of fulfillment out of being an important woman who goes to work and has a career and wants to maintain that sense of fulfillment. A third option is that there's some emotional connection with Ted. And we know that that's kind of been there in the background.
I think it's both of those last. I think it's both of those last two. So she obviously is, enthralled with the position of being needed professionally again. And she's also, getting all dolled up to be in front of Ted. And, I think she kind of relates to Ted with his problems, that she has problems also. But I also was impressed with the amount of like she's pretty good at this. She was like, so I led it to this. So that made me lead to this. And that made me lead to this. Like, she is pretty good at this. And it made me wonder, I wonder if this was a big, I don't know, turn on or what for Walt when he met her, to hey, you are really good at the professionalism that she has in her line of work. He also has in his line of work.
Well, remember how she was trying to make income out of gaming eBay?
Yeah. Small batches, like couple bucks here and there. Yeah.
Right. But she saw that if she applied her brain to it, she could win the game.
Right.
And it became evident that it really wasn't a rational choice based upon how much profit she was making, given how much effort it took. But she simply enjoyed winning, of getting a profit and beating the system in some small way. So we know that she enjoys sort of solving puzzles and that kind of a thing. So she's also a stickler for the rules. She says to him, Ted, people go to prison for things like this. And he wants to tell her, oh yeah, but it's not a big deal, and we don't really have a choice, and can't you just sort of fudge the numbers a little bit, and she's really conflicted, and we see that in a couple different places where she's just lost in thought, not sure what she's going to do. So she's got this monumental choice before her, and we see here after she says, I'm not going to be a part of it, and she leaves, we know that she comes back to work. So we're left with the thought, okay, she is going to be a part of it. She's reconciled herself to that somehow.
Right. And Ted's last word was, I don't want you to go.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Well, we'll see where that goes in the next episode or two. Skinny Pete's voicemail to Jesse, actually kind of emotional.
Right.
He's like, everybody was there, Combo's family were all tore up, and they what did he say? The coffin
looked like a Mercedes Benz or something like that.
I think he said like a Volvo or something, a little bit less luxurious, but he said the paint job was real nice on the coffin. But he says that Badger came all the way from California for this funeral. He says, where were you? He says, you must have had something really important going on.
Yeah, handling something.
Yeah. And I just thought, wow, this is really an interesting turn when Skinny Pete seems to have his life more together than Jesse does. And that's when Jesse starts to indulge in this drug trip that I guess lasts a while. And it was an interesting scene, right? When the way that they filmed it, when he's getting high, kind of floating there in space.
It was actually really cool. So I've seen the behind the scenes of it. And
okay.
He's actually on a forklift. And so they have him at the bottom of on the floor, and they just bring him up with the camera. And so he's just hanging there. It was actually pretty cool. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting music too. Some 1950s style singer. Kind of just added to the not just otherworldliness, but sort of out of timeness. It was anachronistic in a way. Okay, so Walt is determined to make this connection with Gustavo Fring, and he shows a level of determination to make this work. And I guess it's because he thinks this is their only option, is to sell their supply wholesale to this guy who's then going to take all the risks of distributing it somehow. But the way it comes out that we find out who Gus is interesting. Again, the least likely person that you would expect.
Right.
The guy who owns, how many of those stores does he own?
It says 14. And for someone that is, apparently is very cautious man, to have a meet at one of his, in front of his employees seems very non-cautious.
Well, so I was left with that. Was he ever going to meet with him, or did he just want to see him?
Well, he explains it. He said, your partner was late and he was high. You have bad judgment. I don't work with people with bad judgment. So once he saw that
tells me maybe he was never going to meet with him. He just wanted to see if he showed up on time and was responsible, and then he would call him later or something like that. I don't know.
Right. Like he was open to the possibility of being surprised based on what his intel was.
Right. But we get the sense that what chemistry is to Walt, sort of human nature is to Gus. Like he reads people.
Right.
And he's very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very cautious because of his understanding of how sort of, people work and operate.
How did you feel when he said, you and I are nothing alike, Mr. White? Because at that point you weren't really sure, but when you could see his eyes, his whole face just changes. And when he says Mr. White, you're like, oh man.
He knows exactly who. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was, it was kind of creepy.
What were your thoughts on how Walt decided to go back to Pollos Hermanos? Because Saul had said, hey, listen, it's a no-go no matter what. I didn't even speak to him. I called a guy who called a guy who called a guy. It's a no-go. And it reminded me of like the very beginning when you see Walt go to the Pollos Hermanos, the restaurant. He was very like he was looking all over. And so when Saul told him that, he's probably just going through the entire time that he was there. He's like, there
Right.
was nobody there that would have come in and left. So like when he goes back to there, did he just go back to the restaurant just to think and then maybe come up with a plan? Because he didn't recognize the possibility of it being Gus until he was looking out the window, and then he just happened to see in the reflection that Gus was staring at him. And then that's when he put two and two together. But like for the whole point of actually going back there and just is very it's very interesting.
Yeah, right. No, there's no way of knowing. All we can really, derive from it is that he was very determined. He was going to do whatever it would take, and then he's very observant. Like you said, he's going back and he's thinking through all the details of what happened, and then he's very confident. Right when he knows that it's Gus, he's gonna go all in and say, I know that you're the guy, and let's talk. What did you think of Walt's answer when Gus basically asks him, why are you partnering yourself with a guy like Jesse?
Right. Was there some truth to that? Or was that just a negotiation tactic?
Some truth to what?
His answer of saying like, because I can trust him because he does what I say. Like that's pretty. He wouldn't say that if Jesse was sitting right next to him, right? Like that was something that was pretty bold of him to say, but he looked pretty confident saying it.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Did Walt really think that? Does Jesse regularly do what Walt says? I mean, I guess maybe when they're in the RV, hey Jesse, I need 2 liters of water in this beaker, or I don't know, maybe. But it seems that also Jesse is a constant source of frustration for Walt and doesn't do what he wants him to do.
But he's also the only person that he knows about this whole racket. Like he
Well,
doesn't know anyone else other than the 2 people he ran into at the Home Depot store.
right. But what I think Saul would say and what I think Gus would say is, look, you need to drop this guy. He is nothing but a liability for you. He doesn't bring anything to the table now that we're doing distribution in another way. You need to just kill this guy or tell him to get lost or pay him off or something and get rid of him. So this is another instance of where we see that there's a genuine affection, sense of relationship between Walt and Jesse. And Walt's not ready to get rid of Jesse, even though he should not trust him. And Gus reminds him of that. Don't trust a drug addict. And he says, oh, I can trust him. Gus is like, you're naive.
Right.
So it's more evidence that there's more to the relationship between Walt and Jesse than simply business.
Right. But I liked how Walt Heisenberg, whatever, was negotiating with Gus because he pulled at the business strings of what he was offering. He's like, you can charge double with my product.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like look beyond what you deem to be, unprofessional, and just know that I will handle that. You will never see him, but look at the dollar signs. And then that's the next question was like, how much do you have on hand?
Yeah. So on that point, when Gus sends his guy to tell him, bring all of your supply to this location and be there in 1 hour, or the deal's off and we'll never speak to you again. Why the time constraints? Was he testing him? Was he testing him to see, well, if you can make this happen, then we'll go forward. If you can't, then I'm just going to say you guys don't have it together enough. Why give him the time constraint? If we're talking about,
I think it was a little bit of that, but also a little bit of this is who you're dealing with. Like
I tell you what to do and you do what I say.
Right. I'm the boss.
Yeah, I have the leverage.
Exactly.
Well,
and that guy just came out of nowhere,
Right. But in a way, what Walt ends up having to do proves that Gus was right. Jesse is not going to help you in this endeavor, complete your end of the bargain, right? Walt has to literally break his door in, Jesse's door in order to get to their, wherever he was hiding the meth.
Right.
So Gus is kind of already kind of coming off as this wise guy who truly does know what he's doing. And there's a strong contrast between him and Walt and Jesse, and they're kind of just chaotic, whatever it is that they're doing. Okay. And then the episode finishes on this really big choice for Walt when Skylar starts to go into labor and texts him and calls him and says, hey, baby's coming. Or she calls and he doesn't answer because he's so desperate to collect the meth. Now, this is kind of a pressing scene for anyone who's watching, but I was watching this episode in the hospital because, as you know, Caleb, my wife just gave birth to our second daughter. And so we were literally, in the midst of all of this when I'm watching this show. So I know very much the pressure that's involved when the wife's going into labor. And, we almost didn't make it to the hospital in time. The baby came so quickly. So I understand.
You know exactly what Walt was going
I know
through.
exactly. Yeah. And it's not Walt's first baby either, right? They have Walter Jr. He's been through this before. So he knows I might not have a lot of time. And yet the episode ends with him collecting the meth and going out the door. And we must conclude he's going to make the drug drop and then go to the hospital. And I know, because of my experience just the last 2 days, that he might not make it in time and he might miss the birth. And that's the choice that he's deciding to make. So any thoughts on?
Well, I'm just seeing his face, because you see him get happy for like a split second and then come to the realization of, oh no.
Right. When he sees the text and says baby's coming, he gets this just pure joy on his face.
Yep. And then the reality sinks in, and he knows that obviously Jesse is nowhere capable of helping at this point. He has nobody. And, the guy at the restaurant said, if you're not there at the right time, never show your face at this restaurant again. He knows that this is the only shot he has.
Right.
But also his baby's coming. Oh yeah. Man, I that's. Oof.
So why this was a perfect choice is because Walt, remember, has always said that the whole point of selling the meth was for his family.
Right.
And now it looks as though he's going to abandon his family at a very critical time. And you and I both have kids, so we know how much the wife depends on the husband to get through labor.
But here's the really part that's hard to accept, is that he doesn't even know that she has help. She doesn't know that she's at the hospital. He doesn't know anything. She called and he didn't answer.
Right.
She could be waiting for him to come pick her up. Like that.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of these questions will be answered in the next episode, but it's helpful to pause before we go on just to realize the weight of that choice because of all the things that could be going on, because we're in a position right now of ignorance about her situation. All we know is that we know she's at work. He doesn't know that. And that she felt a tug, and when my wife went into labor just a couple of days ago, it happened that fast. Her water broke and she just felt like a rubber band inside her just snapped, and so that's kind of what it looks like for Skylar, right? Like something internal just happens and she knows this is happening. But Walt doesn't know that. You're right. So he's having to, if he's going to go and do this drug drop, he is going to assume and risk a lot of things. He's going to say, I'm guessing that she's somewhere where someone else can help her and she can drive herself, or someone else can drive her to the hospital. And that by the time I get there, she won't, have needed me, and I can afford to do this. That's the choice that he's making. We'll find out next episode if his gamble works out.
Yep. We only have 2 episodes left for this season also.
Oh, wow. I can tell everything's kind of coming to a pinnacle here.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot needs to happen in the next 2 episodes. Especially we need to know what's going on with the pink bear that shows up from time to time.
Right. I really hope we get an explanation about that.
All right. Thank you all for listening in. We appreciate it. We always ask that you like, share, subscribe. We are on Apple, YouTube, and Patreon account. Anything, any comments, we'd love to hear from you. And always, we'd ask you to join us for the next episode as we break into another episode of Breaking Bad.